Hello and welcome to Ignite 2021's On-Demand Industry Panels. My name is Stacy Moore and I'm the Director of Career Services at Delaware Valley University. This panel today, focused on the cannabis industry, is part of Career Services' Career Exploration Series. You can check out more of the industry panels on our SharePoint site. So today we're very excited to have each of our industry professionals with us to share about their career stories. Please note that our panelists are willing to connect with you, our students. If you'd like to connect individually with any of them, you can email cspd@delval.edu and we'll get you their contact information. So to get started, I am going to have each of our panelists introduce themselves with their name, their title, and their organization. So why don't you kick us off, Alyssa, and then we'll go to Courtney.
Okay, well, thanks for having me. I'm Alyssa Collins, and I am an associate professor of plant pathology at Penn State University. But my other title is director of the Penn State Southeast Agricultural Research and Extension Center. And that's basically a research farm in Lancaster County where we get to conduct our experiments in real life. So I am a scientist who farms.
Hi, everyone. I'm Courtney Moran, and I actually have a few different positions. I am an attorney, and I run my own law firm, Earth Law LLC. And I also have a federal lobbying firm, national lobbying firm, Agricultural Hemp Solutions, of which I'm the chief legislative strategist. And then I also run an Oregon nonprofit farmers association, the Oregon Industrial Hemp Farmers Association, and I'm their president and lobbyist.
Great, thank you. So we'll dive right in with just, if you could tell us each how you got started in this particular career.
My story is a little convoluted. So when I was a person in high school and early in college, I knew that I wanted to save the world, but that's all the direction I had. So I think I started out like a lot of us do, and I majored in biology. But over the course of my summer jobs and the positions that kind of presented themselves to me and what I took advantage of, I ended up looking at agriculture as a possible way of saving the world. So instead of going off into the rainforest, like I thought I was going to be doing, I ended up identifying like our little part of the world, and I'm from South Jersey. So that part of the world was a part that's worth saving. And if we all do that, you know, in our little parts, then we can really make a difference. And so I ended up studying plant pathology because Petri dishes are very cool. And you get to do that and you get to diagnose sick plants. And plants don't bleed or cry or sue you. So that method of medicine was the path for me. Not nearly as lucrative, but I decided to go on this academic path, which also allowed me to really be a practitioner. So through graduate school opportunities, I discovered this world of extension, and extension is this thing that all land-grant universities have, and it's really the bridge between scientists who test ideas in labs and greenhouses and the people who need the fruits of this labor. So basically extension they're the folks that translate nerd for people who can actually use this information so that we can apply it in the rest of our world. So that is sort of what started me in agriculture in general. And then through, just sort of opportunities that came along as I traveled this road, I applied for a bunch of extension jobs and I didn't get them, but then I applied for this job that was to be the scientist in charge of a research farm. And I said, I'm totally not qualified for that, but it seems really cool. I'm going to apply for it anyway. And I got the job. And so here I am, someone who was not a farmer, but a scientist studying farming. Now I'm in charge of a farm. And oh God, I need to learn how to farm now. And so I was very lucky that my staff were good farmers. So if I'm a scientist who farms, they're farmers who science. And along that that road, they kind of taught me and got me some street cred. So how did I end up in hemp? I'm actually the lead of the Penn State Hemp Research Program and Extension Program. A lot of people don't certainly start out as a little girl being like, I want to be a hemp researcher. And that's the beauty of it, right? Most of us don't know these jobs exist until we're in them somehow. And that happened with this position as well. So through what I do, one of the things we do is, well, we do what's relevant to Pennsylvania agriculture, right? So we test out things and we kill plants so you don't have to. So our job is to kind of figure out the best way to grow things so that farmers or people who want to begin farming don't have to spend their valuable time and resources to do that. We get paid through taxpayer money to support those efforts and try these things out before we tell a bunch of people, oh yeah, you should go grow this crop. And so my colleagues said, hey, all of a sudden we can grow hemp here in Pennsylvania. This is 2017. Would you like to join with me and cover the plant pathology part of it? And I said, sure, yeah. And then he retired and I was the sole person left at Penn State who knew anything about hemp, and it was not much. So that is kind of how I ended up being the head of the extension program for hemp, because I literally was the only person who knew anything about the growing system. And talking to colleagues across the country, that's kind of how we all ended up in it on the research side of things. I don't know if Courtney's experience was the same, but I know a lot of researchers who have this same story.
No, for a lot of researchers, that's exactly what I hear too, is that they kind of just fell into it on their pathway. And I got to say, Alyssa, like the work that you do and the work that researchers do is so valuable, and it's so necessary for the development of our industry. So I'm so grateful to you and to everyone else that's out there charting the course. Very important. Okay, so how did I get started? Well, I was a bio minor, history major, and I was going to law school. But I got into the hemp world first when I was a senior in college. I was given the book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes by Jack Herer. And that book talks all about the history of cannabis, the uses, the environmental benefits, the conspiracy theories on why we have prohibition. And I really just could not believe what I was reading. I had grown up in the DARE program, and, marijuana was evil. And, then I get this book and I'm learning like the plant itself has all these incredible benefits and value. I mean, how is this a Schedule I drug? And more so on the industrial side, right? And I'm looking at it towards an environmental conservation perspective. And I had been in a plant biology class at the time, and our assignment was pick a plant and write about it. And so I wrote about cannabis, and the assignment was where 3 other students would grade your paper, and then you would grade 3 other students' paper, and it was kind of the average of that grade that you got from everybody else that was going to be your grade. And one student gave me an A, the other 2 failed me. And I went to my professor and I said, I've done the assignment, like everything that they said that I didn't do was right here within the paper. And it became just so apparent to me that it was the subject matter. It was not how I wrote the paper, but it was the subject matter. So then when I went to law school, which law school is very challenging, but if you want to go to law school, go for it. And then I found out during my second year that that National NORML, the National Organization for Reform of Marijuana Laws, had a legal internship. And so I applied to them. I had a couple conversations with the founder, Keith Straub, and he said, yeah, come out to DC. We want you to work with us. And so I interned for them that summer. And that was back in 2010. So there weren't any recreational marijuana programs. There were no hemp programs. There were a few medical marijuana programs at the time. And so we were doing research on different medical marijuana issues. And I had met a couple attorneys that were in Oregon because I was living in Minnesota at the time. And Keith had founded NORML back in 1971. And so he had been fighting for 40 years at that time to legalize this plant. And I'd have conversations with him. I'm like, by the time I'm your age, like, we're going to see it, we're going to see the plant free. And 2 years later, we had adult use cannabis in Colorado and Washington. And so after I finished law school, I moved to Oregon and I started doing medical marijuana criminal defense work, but I knew very quickly that's not what I wanted to do. Like, my passion was hemp, my passion is the environment. I want to work with farmers. And so I actually went back to school and earned a Master of Laws in Environmental and Natural Resources Law at Lewis and Clark. And my very first day of class, my climate change law professor had asked me, she's like, well, what do you want to do? Why are you getting your LLM? And I said, I want to run a hemp program. And she said, is that a thing? And I was like, well, no, no, they don't exist yet, but I want them to. She's like, okay. And so I just focused that whole LLM program on hemp law, the little bit that there was. And this was back in 2013. So this is, pre-2014 Farm Bill, before any pilot programs had started. And once I had finished my LLM program, I started just doing outreach to folks around the country that were, interested in hemp. And by the fall of 2013, when I was finishing the LLM program, there started to be different conversations happening in the cannabis world on a federal level, because the federal Cole memo had come out, which had set out federal prosecutorial guidance for prosecutors in really Colorado and Washington that would guide how they would implement the programs in those states, because obviously the recreational marijuana was completely contradictory to federal law. And so fortunately, being in Oregon, our Congressman Blumenauer, he had, analyzed this and said, well, if this applies to marijuana, this should also apply to hemp programs, because the way that marijuana was defined under federal law incorporated all cannabis sativa, regardless of use or concentration limit at the time. So he sent a letter out to our U.S. attorney at the time, Amanda Marshall, and asked for clarification. And she wrote a letter back and said, yes, I agree with you. These 8 principles within the Cole memo should apply to hemp programs. So conversations started in regards to developing a hemp program, because we did have a hemp law on the books in Oregon, but it was never implemented because there was no federal guidance. And then there was a couple conversations that happened. Now it's February 2014, and the federal Farm Bill is passed, which opens up the door for hemp research through agricultural pilot programs. And so you would have thought that would have gotten Oregon ready to go set up a program. But because Oregon State University at the time did not want to engage in research because they were afraid it would affect their federal funding, all the conversations stopped. So now I'm sitting here, I just got out of school, we had this opportunity, everything stopped. And I just was like, I'm not going to sit here and stand for this. We have to get this going. There's federal authority, there's state authority. There's no reason we shouldn't do this. So I had hosted an event, just trying to get some public awareness and educational event. I reached out to our congressional delegation. I got support from them. They wrote me letters. They made videos for the event. And one of the farmers that I had speak at the event, he was a hopeful farmer and wanted to participate. And so we got together and we actually applied to the Department of Agriculture in 2014 for him to get a license to operate a hemp farm. And while it was a very detailed application, I created their registration forms. I did everything that they needed to do, right? But they denied it because they didn't have rules in place. But they knew that we were serious. So they put me on the Rules Advisory Committee and we started working on the policy. We had and I had submitted that application in early July, right around July 4th. They put me on the advisory committee. We had rules drafted by December. We had our first license issued by February 2nd, 2015. So we were able to get a program up and running. And then, sorry to keep going on, but then what happened was there was a lot of concerns from the marijuana industry about cross-pollination and how this would impact the marijuana industry if hemp producers were starting to grow hemp around the state. And so we had, some serious negotiations back and forth. We tried to work it out internally, but some marijuana industry folks went to the legislature and actually tried to get a bill passed that would have shut down our hemp industry before we even got it up and running. And so I was just at the time working as a citizen advocate, just, for free, just going out there and like sending emails and making phone calls and trying to get the legislature to understand what they were about to do if they had passed this bill. And it caught the attention of the House Majority Leader at the time, and she invited me down to testify at a hearing. And I explained to them all the issues going on, the economic opportunities, what cross-pollination is, what it isn't. And one of the first licensees was sitting in the room, and he heard me testify, and he hired me on the spot to be his lobbyist. So from then on, I've been working on policy and lobbying. And that 2015 session, we were able to shut that bill down and stop it. Farmers were able to grow that session. But what it made us realize was that we needed to band together if we were going to have a powerful voice in the Capitol and not just have these different individuals trying to come and, protect their own farms. So that's when we created the Oregon Industrial Hemp Farmers Association. I've been lobbying for them ever since. We've passed 5 bills to date that have, developed some of the most forward-thinking progressive hemp policy in the country. A lot of other states have followed our lead. And after that, the first bill we passed in 2016, a lot of other states saw what I did and they called me. So I started just working in other states and passing bills for them and setting up hemp programs for them. And again, because of me being in Oregon, and I had already been coordinating with Senator Wyden's office in fall of 2016, and then very early 2017, I started working with his office on language for the Hemp Farming Act, which ended up being the Hemp Farming Act of 2018, and the language included in the 2018 Farm Bill that federally legalized hemp. So for me, the journey has been absolutely incredible. And, it went from something not existing to, playing a key role in developing a lot of the policy that's opened up these programs around the country.
That's terrific. I know that both of your stories are going to be really powerful and inspiring to students. So I appreciate you sharing. And I think the next question will also be important for students to hear. So I'm curious if you could answer some of the question about some of the typical challenges that you deal with in your profession just day to day. And we can kick it off with whoever would like to start.
Well, let me just first say, shine the light back on Courtney, because her work is equally important in this industry, because this crop in particular comes with so much legal baggage, right? This is not something we deal with almost any other crop. And if not for that work to kind of plow the way for the rest of us to do what we do, we are not here. We don't get the opportunity to do the research or the growing or anything like that. So that is really critical in, a government and policy environment that we all exist in. It would be great if we just don't have to worry about any of that, but we do. And so that, none of us would be here doing this without that work, because Penn State, like Oregon State, wanted to keep things far away because we survive on federal funding. And so without those allowances, we have to keep our distance. And so they were very careful about that too. But that kind of is part of what's a challenge, right? For what I do is, I get to do research, but I don't get to necessarily have the funding to do research. So our salaries are paid by the university, but that's it. So if you have an idea about some research that you would like to do, or someone asks you to do some research, sometimes people come to me and say, we'd love Penn State to work on this. And I say, great, can you fund it? And they say, what? What do you mean? We don't actually get the funding automatically to do research. That largely comes through grant funding. And so, especially with hemp, it's been a little bit challenging as we navigate this regulatory landscape, because for a long time, we're used to relying on federal grants and state grants to support a lot of our work. And in this case, they weren't even close to, they had just said yes to, you can grow this on a research basis. They weren't anywhere near getting to the point where they said, oh, you can use the federal grants for this. And so for a long time, we were just kind of piecing together money from here or there, maybe a little funding from the college, maybe a little private funding because a company wanted to know if this, organic pesticide would work on it. So that's one of the challenges we deal with, is you kind of have to ask for money to do your job in this job. But on the other hand, that gives you a little bit of freedom, right? You can pursue the questions that you want the answers to, or that your constituents want the answer to. So Stacy and I were talking earlier about how do you come up with ideas for what you're going to research? And I thought, this is going to be a challenge for me. I'm like, by the time I get into science, all the things are going to be known. Like, we're going to know all the things because all these people have been working on it for so long. And that is so far from the truth, I can't even explain. So the way we figure out what we're going to work on is, one, well, what is their funding for? And it's not just the money, it's about the interest that exists, or the need that exists in society, that people say, oh, this is so important to us that we're going to put money in front of you for it. And if you would like to come to us with an idea that we think is good, we will give you this money to do this research. So that's part of it. The other part is when people come to us and ask us questions and we don't have the answers. We're supposed to be the experts, right? But we certainly don't have all the answers. And so when that happens, an academic person goes to the literature and says, has anyone looked at this before? And you read and you find out, and that's how you get better at knowing things, but it's also how you find gaps in our knowledge. And so if you don't know the answer and no one else knows the answer, well, you've just identified your next research project if someone is, excited enough about it to fund it. So I would say that's part of the challenge on a day-to-day basis with everything I do, not just with hemp, but with corn diseases and celery, and everything that we work on does have its own challenges along those lines. Specifically in hemp, this is two sides of the same coin, right? It's exciting and challenging, but it's hard and challenging, is that unlike other crops, there's no infrastructure. Like, if you wanted to become a hemp farmer, well, what else do you farm, first of all? But also, where are you going to sell your hemp? Where are you going to get it processed? Who's going to buy it? And those chains of commerce, they don't exist yet. We're still building them. And so we're having a little bit of a chicken and the egg situation where farmers are willing to grow, and they can grow hemp for sure, because we can figure out how to grow anything, right? Farmers are good at that. But they need to have someone to grow for, and those processors need to exist around them. And so far they don't, mostly because those processors don't have anyone growing yet, So it's like, who's going to put in that risk first? Is it the growers who grow a whole bunch of material and attract processors and buyers, or is it the processors who set up a place for farmers to bring their material and get paid for it? That's kind of the point we're at right now. And that's okay. That's how industries build. But everyone kind of expects things to happen right away and for everything to work or not work. And that's not really how it goes. It's little bits at a time, kind of the regulatory landscape, it's little bits at a time, and you win some and you lose some,
Yeah, I agree with that 100%, Alyssa. you said earlier, like there's like this cloud over hemp, and it's true, right? We've had to like separate hemp from the definition of marijuana, try to remove it from this reefer madness sphere that still exists. Like when I get sometimes in rooms with law enforcement or prosecutors and I hear them talk about the policy or what's happening on the ground, there's still so much fear, right? And marijuana is not federally legal yet. We have some very serious conversations happening in the House and finally in the Senate around, full cannabis legalization. But until we get to that point, we're still going to have all of these different hurdles that we have to overcome from a legal and regulatory standpoint, just for hemp itself and for our farmers. And so the challenges that we face, number one, the biggest hurdle was legalize hemp, right? Which we did. We got through that hurdle. But what we've learned since then is so many things, but that we open one door and we think that we can keep going, but now there's another door right in front of us. So we have to find the key and unlock that door as well. And so it's as we're growing, as the industry is developing, it's finding out, okay, what did we not accomplish yet? What other hurdles do we have to get through to provide access to the markets? And so one example is animal feed policy, which is something that I've been working on this year. We legalized hemp, but because of some of the authority that was left over with FDA, there's still restrictions on giving hemp grain and fiber to animals for feed. And so we passed a bill in Montana this year that opened up the door within Montana, but now there's still pushback on a federal level. And so now we're really trying to push the feds to open that door so other states can have access. And other states are trying to, pass legislation to do the same thing. On the CBD side, I mean, we have a complete conflict between what states are authorizing versus what the federal government is authorizing. And so that's another challenge that we're constantly facing is, what are these states trying to do? And we have, a 50-state patchwork of different policies that have been developed through the pilot program authority because we didn't have overarching, and we still don't have full overarching federal policy, and some still in direct conflict with the federal law. So we're dealing with that. And not only dealing with it, from my position as, a lawyer and a lobbyist and advising clients and working on developing the policy, but that my clients have to face every day in what rules do they have to follow to get their products to market in a particular state or what have you. And it's challenging, right? And that's why it's so important that the industry does work together and that we try to find some cohesion in developing policy and try to move these fears away so that we can continue to advance policy. But one other challenge I would say, and it's in particular in the role that I play, is liaisoning between farmers and processors and manufacturers within the industry versus the regulators versus law enforcement, right? Because every single one of them are coming from a different perspective. Law enforcement is only seeing the bad actors, and they're seeing the folks that aren't complying, and that's who they're dealing with day to day. And we have agency personnel that are, their jobs and what they can do is directly dictated by the statute and by the law, and that's the framework that they can operate in, and that they're just trying to regulate a program, and keep folks compliant. And then industry is, trying to stay compliant and not have law enforcement concerns with, some confusions between hemp and marijuana, but then they're also trying to push the market, and create new products and create the market and expand opportunities for themselves, both financially and, within the products that they're making. And what we're seeing right now with several issues in regards to different cannabinoid productions is that the market is way ahead of the regulations. And so it's trying to keep those caught up with one another and get everybody at the table and on the same page so that we can, ensure that we're protecting the farmers, keeping our products safe for consumers, and making sure it's a framework that the regulators can actually implement and enforce.
I'm learning a lot from you all just by hearing. There's so much that goes into it. So I appreciate all of what you're saying. I'm curious for this final question. I can't even believe we've spent time. We're almost at time already. But for this next question, if you can share an example of a professional obstacle that you faced and how you overcame it.
I'm still thinking, Courtney, do you have one?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So what just came to my mind when you said that was honestly just doing the work that I do. And when I started doing this, I remember my law school, one of my mentors, I told her, I wanted to get in the cannabis industry and I wanted to work on, cannabis policy. And she said to me, she's like, well, no pun intended, but won't that weed out your potential employers? And I said to her, if I can't even have this conversation, then I don't want to work with these people, And so it was really just knowing that what I was doing was right and believing in the work that I was doing and just going for it. We've charted a whole new course, a whole new industry here. We've developed the policy to open up the door for farmers to grow this, for researchers to research this crop, which they historically were not able to do. And, we just had to go out there and believe and know what we were doing was right. And so that's been a challenge over the years, right? And learning to engage with law enforcement when that from their perspective, all of this has been illegal and, we're changing policy and changing the way that they operate and enforce on a day-to-day basis and just learning how to work with them, and not against them, right? So it's really it's been a major learning experience about, I think, courage and just like believing in yourself and believing in what you believe in and knowing that you can go after it. And so that's one thing that when I talk with students, that I really try to encourage them is that, there are all these jobs and careers out there, that are just set for you. But if there's something that you like truly believe in and that is right in your heart and it's good for humanity and for the earth and it's not going to hurt anybody, you have to go for it. And I think you need to have the inspiration and the courage to do so, and don't let people tell you no.
Yeah, I'm thinking, I struggle, and I still struggle with something that a lot of professional women struggle with, especially in agriculture too, is that just finding ways to keep my professional life separate from my personal life. And part of that is complicated by the fact that I live in a farmhouse at the research center that I run. So you never get to leave work, which is a blessing and a curse. On really bad weather days, it's like, yes, I can literally walk downstairs in yoga pants and, just start work. But, as we've learned over the last year or so, working from home is not always ideal. And it does make it difficult to separate your life and establish boundaries. And so that is part of what I still struggle with. And so I would say I have not overcome it, but I am learning to be a lot more honest about what I can and can't do and what I do and don't want to do. Everything that comes to me almost that is a demand is worthy. Everything is worthy. Everything is like, yes, someone should work on that. Or, yeah, I can see the urgency of that, but none of us can do all of it. And so the way that I've begun to work through this is to really lean on the network of people that I've established around me. And I think getting into the hemp industry has taught me a lot about connections and how we don't get to progress on a large scale unless we're making connections with people who can help us and who we can help. And as a woman in agriculture, it's hard to ask for help, right? It's something that you're like, no, I can do this and I should show I can do this. But that is kind of a stalling tactic. Someone else can help you with this. And if that's the case, then it might also be an opportunity for that person to get to do something that they wouldn't otherwise have gotten to do. So being open to networking and to making those connections has really helped a lot. And I think also over this last year, we've all learned to give each other a lot of grace. and say, oh, okay, I certainly understand you can't do this, or yeah, we can definitely take this up again, maybe in a couple of months when you're less busy. And that's been really helpful. We've all learned a lot, I think, about each other's personal lives, and that's probably good. We're all human, and we would all like to have lives that maybe aren't completely consumed by what we do for work, and that's okay.
That's an awesome way to end too, because it's a little bit of advice in addition to the sharing of the answer to that question. And again, students, for all of you who are interested in connecting, remember to email cspd@delval.edu, and you can connect with either of our panelists individually. So thank you to both of you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.